Ahlan Chavre. Welcome back, good people. Leviticus chapter 18, verse 22 was discussed in the last video in summary. And in this video, we are going to look at it a little more in depth. This is going to require willingness to become familiar with the Hebrew language. And that's a necessity for any serious investigation into the meaning of the biblical text of the Hebrew Bible, the so-called Old Testament. It doesn't require becoming fluent, but it does require some familiarity. In the last video, we mentioned how the phrase in the verse of Leviticus 18, verse 22, a man shall not lie with a man as one lies with a woman. We mentioned how the phrase as one lies with is wholly absent from the Hebrew language. This is a fact. It's also a fact that had the author of the verse intended that, he had the full capacity to say that in Hebrew. Sometimes in translations, you do have to sort of fill the gaps when there are grammatical features that don't exist in the language you're translating to, which require you to kind of fill in gaps to make sense of it. This verse is not such a case. So, how do we make sense of this verse, removing the phrase as one lays with, right? The verse simply says, Vet zakhar lo mishkav isha. A man should not lay with a male the layings of a woman or a wife. We'll begin with the term mishkav. Mishkav is the word translated typically as lay with the word with not being present in the Hebrew. And this word, mishkav, is actually not a verb. It's being translated as a verb almost always in this verse, but it's a noun. This noun very commonly is used as a Hebrew euphemism for sexual intercourse, for actual intercourse, not foreplay, not a proclivity, but actual intercourse. That already excludes the verse as prohibiting a homosexual orientation or proclivity. If anything, this verse is only prohibiting sexual intercourse. Furthermore, in the Hebrew language, when you want to make a noun, which is an object, a person, place, or thing, when you want to make a noun plural possessive, such as like my hands or my houses, you take the noun and you add a suffix a to it. That's why in this verse, a is added to the noun mishkav, giving us mishkave isha. A common example of this, which may be familiar to you in the English-speaking world, is how many synagogues are called Bnei Israel, Bnei Israel, with Ben meaning son, Bnei meaning sons of, and Israel. So the name of the synagogues Bnei Israel means sons of Israel, or Israel's sons. Hand is Yad. If I want to say hands of God, I would say Yadeh Elohim, Elohim meaning God. So Yadeh Elohim, hands of God. Or you could say in more colloquial terms in English, God's hands. So mishkave isha means the layings of a woman or a woman's layings. You could also say the sexual relations or the sex, meaning the activity of sex, not gender type. The sex of a woman or sexual relations of a woman or a woman's sexual relations. Another important fact to note here is that the Hebrew word for wife is the same as the Hebrew word for an adult woman, isha. They are the same exact term. This is because in the vast majority of cases, an adult woman is married in the historical context of the Bible. And this is true even in many places in the world up until the present time. But for that reason, the words are literally synonymous. And if an adult woman is not married, it's pretty much universally due to either her husband dying, so she's a widow, or to her being divorced. And in both of those cases, she's not typically referred to in the text as isha, but she will be referred to as a divorced woman or a widowed woman, with the woman being inferred in the noun itself, not needing to actually say the word woman in the Hebrew language, but it's inferred in the noun itself, because as with many Latin languages, Spanish, Italian, etc., also in Hebrew, every single noun is either male or female. So that's that. So now, this word isha in the phrase mishkav isha, the layings of a woman, can also be translated as a wife's relations. If you have any qualms with that, well, already throughout this same chapter, Leviticus 18, the term isha is consistently being translated as wife in this very chapter. So it's not a stretch to translate it as wife in this verse as well, in the same exact chapter. It's very easy to build beliefs, convictions, and theologies on translations when the Hebrew could have another interpretation which makes even more sense and takes into account even more aspects of the verse and the wording, which is entirely lost in translation. This is one such case. So we've covered that isha, the word translated here as woman, can also mean wife, and does mean wife in this very same chapter, translated as such by virtually every translation in this very same chapter, just not in this verse. We've touched on mishkav, which is a biblical euphemism, which is not uncommonly used as a term for actual intercourse. So we can translate this verse that a man should not have relations with a man, a wife's relations, or the sex that belongs to the wife. And that's not an interpretation. That's literally one of the valid ways you can actually translate it. The a possessive ending can also be translated as belonging to. Very commonly does. Yadei Elohim, the hands of God, the hands that belong to God. Bnei Yosef, the sons of Yosef, or the sons that belong to Yosef, to Joseph. Furthermore, one may say, okay, but layings of a woman's relations, a wife's relations, it needs to be added here in order to let us know that mishkav in the verse, that the term laying in the verse, is referring to sexual activity. Well, in answer to that, we can already see from the entire chapter that the context is sexual and referring to intercourse. So that's rather unnecessary. Furthermore, in the very next verse, when discussing bestiality, the verse had no need to say, a man shouldn't lay with an animal the layings of a woman. It just says, a man shouldn't lay with an animal. If it can do it there, it can do it in this verse as well. Meaning that the added phrase, a wife's relations or a woman's relations, is coming to explain something further in the verse. You could already know that you shouldn't have relations with a man. If that's the simple intent, then the verse could just say, Lo tishkav et zakhar lo tishkav ish. That's it. A man shouldn't lay with a man. A man shouldn't have sex with a man. But instead it says, Et zakhar lo tishkav mishkav isha. A man shouldn't lay with a man, a wife's relations, marital relations. I.e., one of these men is married to a woman, and he shouldn't be doing with another man what is his duty to his wife. This makes a lot of sense also in the context of the Bible, considering that there are references in the Torah to male prostitutes and to men dressing as women. Men dressing as women it's not necessarily in reference to transgenderism, because as we know even today, some men dress in women's clothing because the women's clothing turns them on, because it's a woman's, i.e. they're not gay. Some straight men do this. And some gay people will dress up as a woman, even if they're not transgender, simply to appeal to more males. To appeal to males who are not normally attracted to men, but would be more likely attracted to them because they're looking more like a woman, i.e. straight men. So if you have a male prostitute 3,000 years ago, and he's trying to make money, he's going to try to appeal to as many men as possible, he's probably going to dress up as a woman. The male customer may know that it's technically a male, but he doesn't have the appearance of a man. And in being in a world which lacked which lacked birth control, this was a means by which they could have some sort of release during times where they'd be forbidden to their wife for whatever reason or some other issues, and not have to be concerned with pregnancy. So, we talked about in this video that isha, the word translated here as woman, in the very same chapter is often, in the same chapter is translated as wife up until you get to verse 22. Yet we've exposed that it makes perfect sense to translate it as wife even in verse 22. We've explained that the phrase a wife's relations is to specify what kind of relations between two males is forbidden. And also, we've touched on why the second reference to a male in verse 22 is zakhar, which literally just means male, as opposed to ish, which means man. Throughout the chapter, the prohibitions are referred to a man, but suddenly in verse 22, it says ish, man should not lie with a zakhar, male. Perhaps in reference to the fact that a person, a male prostitute, while he's technically a male, doesn't have the appearance of a man. So that's it for now. There's more to come. If you have any further questions, please feel free to write them below, and I will answer as soon as I can. All the best. Shalom uvracha. Yalla bye.